Your parents are standing in my vault with a woman who looks exactly like you. My best friend Keisha whispered into the phone, her voice trembling with a panic I had never heard before. I stared out my office window overlooking the Atlanta skyline, completely confused. That is impossible, Keisha, I said. I paid for their first-class tickets to Maui 2 days ago. They are in Hawaii. Keisha took a sharp breath. Zora, I am looking right at them. They are trying to liquidate your grandmother's trust, and the woman they brought is handing me a passport with your name on it. Please get down here right now before I have to authorize this transfer. My name is Zora. I am 33 years old and the founder of an elite cybersecurity and digital forensics firm. If you are watching this from somewhere where family loyalty is just an illusion, take a moment to like and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to hear how I dismantled my toxic family, starting with the bank heist they tried to pull in broad daylight. I was in the middle of a high-stakes briefing with federal clients when Keisha called. Keisha and I met during our freshman year at Spelman College, and she knew my family's toxic dynamics better than anyone. I dropped my presentation, remote grabbed my car keys, and walked out of the boardroom without a single word of explanation. The drive from my Buckhead office to the downtown financial district usually takes 30 minutes. I made it in 12, weaving through heavy traffic with a cold numbness spreading through my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My mind raced through a lifetime of betrayals trying to process the magnitude of what Keisha had just told me. My mother Vivica and my father Desmond had spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought. I was the family scapegoat, the awkward middle child who preferred coding and building computers over debutante balls and country club socials. My sister Jada was their golden child, the beautiful socialite who could do no wrong. For years I tried to buy my parents' love. I paid off their mortgage. I funded their expensive lifestyle. I even paid for the luxury Hawaiian vacation they were supposed to be enjoying right now. I had literally received a text message from my mother yesterday complaining about the room service in Maui. They had orchestrated an entire fake vacation to ensure I would be completely unsuspecting while they raided my accounts. But committing federal wire fraud, using a body double to steal my inheritance, was a level of criminality even I did not think they were capable of reaching. The $4.5 million trust was not just money to me. It was the last remaining connection to my grandmother. She was the only person in my family who truly saw me and protected me from my mother's constant emotional manipulation. She recognized my potential and left her historic Harlem brownstone and her entire fortune in a locked trust exclusively in my name, ensuring my parents could not touch it. Or so I thought. I abandoned my car in the loading zone outside the bank, ignoring the valet who shouted after me. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the wealth management branch. The lobby was quiet and polished, smelling of expensive coffee and leather furniture. I did not stop at the reception desk to sign in. I marched straight toward the VIP glass-walled office at the back of the building. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing the rapid beating of my heart. The bank staff knew me well enough not to intervene, but I could feel their confused stares following my path. Through the frosted glass panels of the executive suite, I could see them. My father Desmond was wearing the tailored designer suit I had purchased for his birthday. My mother Vivica was carrying the luxury handbag I bought her for Mother's Day. And sitting directly between them was a woman wearing my signature beige trench coat. Her hair was styled in the exact same protective braided updo that I wore to work every day. From the back, the resemblance was uncanny enough to fool anyone who did not know me intimately. She was sliding a blue passport across the mahogany desk toward Keisha. I pushed the heavy glass door open with enough force that it banged against the wall stopper. The air in the room felt instantly suffocating. The imposter froze her hand, hovering over the desk. Vivica whipped her head around and all the color drained from her perfectly made-up face. Desmond dropped his expensive pen onto the floor where it rolled under the desk. I walked straight to the table, refusing to break eye contact with my mother. I reached past the imposter and slammed my hand down flat over the wire transfer authorization form. The document was meticulously filled out, clearly showing a request to move $4.5 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. A signature that looked terrifyingly identical to my own was already inked at the bottom of the page. I looked Keisha dead in the eye and kept my voice dangerously calm. Cancel the wire and call the police right now." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The imposter finally turned her head to look at me, and my stomach dropped. The resemblance was not just a trick of styling or makeup. She had my eyes, my jawline, the exact same dark brown complexion. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. But I did not have time to process the bizarre physical similarity because my mother immediately jumped out of her chair. Vivica did not show a single ounce of remorse or guilt. Instead, she immediately went on the offensive, loudly demanding that Keisha call security. "Please remove this stalker from the premises," Vivica shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She has been obsessing over my daughter Zora for years, trying to steal her identity." The audacity of the lie was so massive it took my breath away. She was actually trying to gaslight me right in front of the banking staff, pretending that the imposter sitting at the desk was the real Zora and that I was the crazy interloper. Maya, the imposter, immediately played along. She brought her hands to her face and began crying on cue, sobbing about how terrified she was that I had followed them to the bank. I did not panic. I did not raise my voice. I leaned across the desk toward my mother. "You think you can forge my signature again, Mom?" I asked, my voice echoing clearly in the small office. "Just like you did 5 years ago when you forged my name to drain my college savings account, just to pay for Jada's $100,000 destination wedding to Connor." Desmond stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me just as he had done my entire childhood. "Young lady, you need to leave before you make a terrible mistake," he warned, his voice dropping into that authoritative tone he used at his church meetings. "There is no mistake, Dad," I replied, standing my ground. "You two faked a trip to Hawaii, set up an offshore account, and hired a lookalike to bypass the biometric security checks on my trust fund. That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The police are going to be very interested in hearing why you need $4.5 million in untraceable cash." Before my father could respond, the door to the bank manager's back office swung open. Connor, my sister Jada's white, entitled real estate developer husband, stepped into the room. He was wearing his usual smug grin, holding a thick stack of legal documents with official court seals on them. Connor had married my sister for her supposed wealth, only to realize my parents were drowning in debt to maintain their image. He needed capital to save his failing luxury condo projects, and my grandmother's trust was the perfect target. Connor had always looked down on me, treating my cybersecurity career as a cute little hobby while he lost millions in bad real estate deals. "Actually, Zora," Connor said smoothly, dropping the stack of papers right on top of the wire transfer form. "According to these court documents, you have recently suffered a severe mental break. A judge signed off on these early this morning. We have full legal guardianship over your estate, your medical decisions, and your finances." I stared at the documents, noting the forged medical evaluations and the signature of a judge I had never met. They had diagnosed me with severe paranoia and delusion, signed by a private physician they probably bribed. They expected me to scream, to cry, to act exactly like the unstable woman described in those pages. That was their plan. Provoke a reaction, have me dragged out in handcuffs, and authorize the wire transfer before the dust settled. But I was not the scared little girl they used to control. Connor turned to the bank manager, who had just rushed into the room, drawn by the commotion. "Please have security physically detain her," Connor ordered, adjusting his expensive tie. "She is a danger to herself and others. We are just trying to get her the psychiatric help she desperately needs while we protect her assets." I looked around the room at the people who were supposed to be my family. They had orchestrated a complete legal and financial assassination. They had planned to lock me away in a psychiatric facility while they drained everything my grandmother had left me. The trap was perfectly laid out, and they looked at me with triumphant smiles, absolutely certain they had won. But they had forgotten one very important detail about what I do for a living. "Your parents are standing in my vault, with a woman who looks exactly like you," my best friend Keisha whispered into the phone, her voice trembling with a panic I had never heard before. I stared out my office window overlooking the Atlanta skyline, completely confused. "That is impossible, Keisha," I said. "I paid for their first-class tickets to Maui 2 days ago. They are in Hawaii." Keisha took a sharp breath. "Zora, I am looking right at them. They are trying to liquidate your grandmother's trust, and the woman they brought is handing me a passport with your name on it. Please get down here right now before I have to authorize this transfer. My name is Zora. I am 33 years old and the founder of an elite cybersecurity and digital forensics firm. If you are watching this from somewhere where family loyalty is just an illusion, take a moment to like and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to hear how I dismantled my toxic family, starting with the bank heist. They tried to pull in broad daylight. I was in the middle of a high-stakes briefing with federal clients when Keisha called. Keisha and I met during our freshman year at Spelman College, and she knew my family's toxic dynamics better than anyone. I dropped my presentation remote, grabbed my car keys, and walked out of the boardroom without a single word of explanation. The drive from my Buckhead office to the downtown financial district usually takes 30 minutes. I made it in 12, weaving through heavy traffic with a cold numbness spreading through my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My mind raced through a lifetime of betrayals trying to process the magnitude of what Keisha had just told me. My mother Vivica and my father Desmond had spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought. I was the family scapegoat, the awkward middle child, who preferred coding and building computers over debutante balls and country club socials. My sister Jada was their golden child, the beautiful socialite who could do no wrong. For years, I tried to buy my parents' love. I paid off their mortgage. I funded their expensive lifestyle. I even paid for the luxury Hawaiian vacation they were supposed to be enjoying right now. I had literally received a text message from my mother yesterday, complaining about the room service in Maui. They had orchestrated an entire fake vacation to ensure I would be completely unsuspecting while they raided my accounts. But committing federal wire fraud, using a body double to steal my inheritance, was a level of criminality even I did not think they were capable of reaching. The $4.5 million trust was not just money to me. It was the last remaining connection to my grandmother. She was the only person in my family who truly saw me and protected me from my mother's constant emotional manipulation. She recognized my potential and left her historic Harlem brownstone and her entire fortune in a locked trust exclusively in my name, ensuring my parents could not touch it. Or so I thought. I abandoned my car in a loading zone outside the bank, ignoring the valet who shouted after me. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the wealth management branch. The lobby was quiet and polished, smelling of expensive coffee and leather furniture. I did not stop at the reception desk to sign in. I marched straight toward the VIP glass-walled office at the back of the building. My heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing the rapid beating of my heart. The bank staff knew me well enough not to intervene, but I could feel their confused stares following my path. Through the frosted glass panels of the executive suite, I could see them. My father Desmond was wearing the tailored designer suit I had purchased for his birthday. My mother Vivica was carrying the luxury handbag I bought her for Mother's Day. And sitting directly between them was a woman wearing my signature beige trench coat. Her hair was styled in the exact same protective braided updo that I wore to work every day. From the back, the resemblance was uncanny enough to fool anyone who did not know me intimately. She was sliding a blue passport across the mahogany desk toward Keisha. I pushed the heavy glass door open with enough force that it banged against the wall stopper. The air in the room felt instantly suffocating. The imposter froze her hand, hovering over the desk. Vivica whipped her head around and all the color drained from her perfectly made-up face. Desmond dropped his expensive pen onto the floor where it rolled under the desk. I walked straight to the table, refusing to break eye contact with my mother. I reached past the imposter and slammed my hand down flat over the wire transfer authorization form. The document was meticulously filled out, clearly showing a request to move $4.5 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. A signature that looked terrifyingly identical to my own was already inked at the bottom of the page. I looked Keisha dead in the eye and kept my voice dangerously calm. "Cancel the wire and call the police right now." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The imposter finally turned her head to look at me, and my stomach dropped. The resemblance was not just a trick of styling or makeup. She had my eyes, my jawline, the exact same dark brown complexion. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. But I did not have time to process the bizarre physical similarity because my mother immediately jumped out of her chair. Vivica did not show a single ounce of remorse or guilt. Instead, she immediately went on the offensive, loudly demanding that Keisha call security. "Please remove this stalker from the premises," Vivica shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She has been obsessing over my daughter Zora for years, trying to steal her identity." The audacity of the lie was so massive it took my breath away. She was actually trying to gas me right in front of the banking staff, pretending that the imposter sitting at the desk was the real Zora and that I was the crazy interloper. Maya, the imposter, immediately played along. She brought her hands to her face and began crying on cue, sobbing about how terrified she was that I had followed them to the bank. I did not panic. I did not raise my voice. I leaned across the desk toward my mother. "You think you can forge my signature again, Mom?" I asked, my voice echoing clearly in the small office. "Just like you did 5 years ago when you forged my name to drain my college savings account, just to pay for Jada's $100,000 destination wedding to Connor." Desmond stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me just as he had done my entire childhood. "Young lady, you need to leave before you make a terrible mistake," he warned, his voice dropping into that authoritative tone he used at his church meetings. "There is no mistake, Dad," I replied, standing my ground. "You two faked a trip to Hawaii, set up an offshore account, and hired a lookalike to bypass the biometric security checks on my trust fund. That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The police are going to be very interested in hearing why you need $4.5 million in untraceable cash." Before my father could respond, the door to the bank manager's back office swung open. Connor, my sister Jada's white, entitled real estate developer husband, stepped into the room. He was wearing his usual smug grin, holding a thick stack of legal documents with official court seals on them. Connor had married my sister for her supposed wealth, only to realize my parents were drowning in debt to maintain their image. He needed capital to save his failing luxury condo projects, and my grandmother's trust was the perfect target. Connor had always looked down on me, treating my cybersecurity career as a cute little hobby, while he lost millions in bad real estate deals. "Actually, Zora," Connor said smoothly, dropping the stack of papers right on top of the wire transfer form. "According to these court documents, you have recently suffered a severe mental break. A judge signed off on these early this morning. We have full legal guardianship over your estate, your medical decisions, and your finances." I stared at the documents, noting the forged medical evaluations and the signature of a judge I had never met. They had diagnosed me with severe paranoia and delusions, signed by a private physician they probably bribed. They expected me to scream, to cry, to act exactly like the unstable woman described in those pages. That was their plan. Provoke a reaction, have me dragged out in handcuffs, and authorize the wire transfer before the dust settled. But I was not the scared little girl they used to control. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket. I did not scream or throw a tantrum the way they had anticipated. Instead, I opened a proprietary application my firm had custom built for this exact banking institution. I looked Connor dead in his smug face and tapped my screen 3 times. A mechanical hum vibrated through the floorboards. Before anyone in the room could process the sound, thick titanium blast doors slid seamlessly out of the walls, slamming shut over the frosted glass panels of the VIP suite. The heavy magnetic locks engaged with a deafening thud, sealing the room completely. The air conditioning instantly shifted to a restricted ventilation mode. My mother gasped, dropping her designer handbag onto the plush carpet. My father lunged toward the exit, pulling violently at the brass handle, but the door did not budge an inch. Connor dropped his forged medical documents, his arrogant smile vanishing instantly as he realized he was trapped in a highly secured box of my own making. "Did you honestly believe you could walk into a Tier 1 financial institution and steal millions without triggering a silent alarm?" I asked. I stepped closer to the center of the room, commanding the space. "You spent my entire life looking down on me because I preferred coding over debutante cotillions. You thought my cybersecurity firm was just some cute little tech startup. You underestimated me because you have always underestimated Black women who refuse to shrink themselves for your comfort. My firm designed the biometric security architecture for this entire banking network. You are currently standing inside a vault that requires my personal retinal scan to open from the inside." Keisha stood behind me, her arms crossed, radiating the exact same unbothered energy. She had already hit the silent panic button under her desk the moment she recognized the imposter. Connor banged his fist against the reinforced glass. "You cannot do this," he yelled, his face flushing an angry shade of red. "I have a court order signed by a judge granting me guardianship over your estate. This is illegal detainment. You are proving my point about your mental instability." I laughed a cold, sharp sound that made the imposter flinch. A piece of paper signed by a corrupt judge means absolutely nothing when you are locked inside a Faraday cage, Connor. There is no cellular signal in this room anymore. You cannot call your lawyers. You cannot call the judge you bribed. You cannot even call my sister to tell her that your pathetic plan to save your failing real estate business just blew up in your face. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest again, trying to salvage his shattered pride. "Zora, open this door immediately. You are embarrassing this family. We can handle this privately at home like adults." "We are not handling anything privately, Dad." I turned my attention to the woman sitting frozen in the client chair, the woman wearing my trench coat and my hairstyle. Up close, the resemblance was genuinely terrifying. She had the same slope of the nose, the same high cheekbones. It was not just good makeup or a talented actress. The bone structure was undeniably familiar. "Who are you?" I demanded. The woman swallowed hard, refusing to make eye contact. She looked to my mother for help, but Vivica turned her face away, her jaw clenched tight with silent fury. I leaned down, placing both hands flat on the mahogany desk, forcing the imposter to look at me. "I have access to facial recognition databases that the federal government uses to track international fugitives," I warned her softly. "If you do not tell me exactly who you are and how much they paid you to steal my identity, I will ensure you spend the next 2 decades in a federal penitentiary for conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Tears spilled over her eyelashes, ruining her perfect makeup. "I did not want to do this," she sobbed, her voice shaking violently. "They told me you were sick. They told me you were locked away in a hospital, and that the money belonged to the family. He told me it was my right to claim it." She pointed a trembling finger directly at my father. Desmond stepped back as if he had been physically struck. "I told you it was your right." I repeated the words slowly, tasting the bitter reality behind them. I looked from the crying woman to my father, and then finally to my mother. Vivica stood perfectly still, her expression a mask of cold calculation. She did not look shocked. She looked annoyed that the secret was out. A sickening realization washed over me. I looked closer at the imposter, seeing the undeniable echoes of my father's face mirrored in her features. "She is your daughter," I stated. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Desmond wiped sweat from his forehead, suddenly looking every bit of his 60 years. "Zora, please let me explain. It happened a long time ago, before you were born. I never knew about Maya until a few years ago." I turned to my mother, the woman who had spent my entire life preaching about respectability politics, demanding perfection to uphold our image at her elite social clubs. "You knew," I said. "You knew he had a secret child who happened to look exactly like me. And instead of divorcing him, you used his illegitimate daughter as a pawn to steal my grandmother's money." Vivica finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with unabashed entitlement. "Your grandmother never liked me," she spat out, venom lacing every syllable. "She left that $20 million estate entirely to you and completely bypassed her own son. Jada is drowning in debt because Connor's real estate developments are failing. We are about to lose the house in Alpharetta. We needed that money, Zora. You have more than enough. You sit in your corporate tower hoarding wealth while your own flesh and blood struggles. Maya was willing to help us correct your grandmother's mistake. You traded your husband's infidelity for a payday," I said, shaking my head in absolute disgust. "You weaponized a secret child to fund Connor's failing business just to maintain your illusion of the perfect wealthy family. You make me sick." Red and blue emergency lights flashed through the front windows of the bank, illuminating the lobby outside our glass cage. 4 armed officers from the Atlanta Police Department strode through the main doors, guided by the bank manager. I pulled my phone back out and disabled the lockdown protocol. The heavy titanium doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Officer Jenkins, a seasoned veteran who had responded to corporate fraud cases, before stepped into the room. Keisha immediately handed him the forged wire transfer documents and the fake passport. These individuals attempted to use a fraudulent identity to wire $4.5 million out of my trust account, I informed the officer, pointing directly at Maya. I want her fingerprinted, and I want all of them charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Maya burst into hysterical tears, holding her hands out as an officer approached her. I am sorry, she wailed. Desmond promised me he would pay off my student loans if I just sat here and signed the paper. I did not know she was a real person. Connor quickly stepped between the police and my parents, holding up his stack of forged legal documents like a shield. Officer, you need to stand down, Connor declared using his loudest, most entitled voice. I am the legal guardian of this estate. My sister-in-law Zora is suffering from a documented psychotic break. A Superior Court judge signed this emergency medical power of attorney this morning, giving me full authorization to transfer these funds for her continued care. This is a civil family matter, not a criminal one. Officer Jenkins took the documents, frowning, as he reviewed the official judicial seal and the signature at the bottom of the page. He looked at me, then back to Connor. Ma'am, this document looks legitimate, he said cautiously. If he has a signed court order granting him financial guardianship, we cannot arrest him for attempting to move the funds. You will need to take this to a judge to get it overturned. I glared at Connor, realizing the true depth of his deceit. He had found a corrupt judge willing to sign an emergency ex parte order without a proper medical hearing, effectively tying the hands of local law enforcement. It was a brilliant, terrifying loophole. This is identity theft, I insisted. The woman sitting in that chair is not me. She presented a fake passport. We can take the imposter into custody for presenting fraudulent identification. Officer Jenkins agreed, gesturing for his partner to handcuff Maya. But as for your parents and your brother-in-law, their names are on this guardianship order. Until a judge strikes this down, they are legally authorized to act on your behalf. We cannot hold them. Vivica straightened her designer jacket, a triumphant smirk returning to her face. I told you, Zora, you always overreact. We are just trying to get you the help you need. Desmond refused to meet my eyes, keeping his head down, as he followed his wife out of the office. They left Maya crying in handcuffs, abandoning her the exact same way they had abandoned me my entire life. Connor lingered in the doorway, holding his forged court documents tightly against his chest. He leaned in close, his blue eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. You might have stopped the wire transfer today, Zora, he whispered, his voice dripping with condescension. And you might think you are a genius for locking us in a room. But you are too late to save the one thing you actually care about. I stared at him, keeping my expression perfectly neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing my anxiety spike. What are you talking about, Connor? Your grandmother's historic brownstone in Harlem, he sneered. Jada and I legally foreclosed on the debt this morning using the guardianship papers to bypass the final notice period. We are hosting a massive Sunday dinner there tomorrow to announce our new luxury condo development to the entire family. It is going to be spectacular. Enjoy your empty bank vault, Zora. Connor turned and walked out of the bank, his arrogant laughter echoing across the marble lobby. Keisha placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, watching them leave. Are you going to let that mediocre man take your grandmother's house? Keisha asked, her voice tight with anger. I watched Connor's car pull away from the curb. I smoothed down the lapels of my suit jacket, a cold, calculated calm washing over me. No, I replied. I am going to let him throw his little party. I want all of them in one room. I am going to let them celebrate their fake victory. And then I am going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from a woman who owns the very ground you stand on. Get your coat, Keisha. We have a Sunday dinner to crash. I walked out of the bank, breathing in the warm Atlanta air. The war had officially begun, and I was ready to bring my entire family to their knees. The heavy oak door to the bank manager's private office swung open with a sharp thud that echoed across the marble floors of the VIP suite. Connor stepped out of the shadows and into the bright fluorescent light. He was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, looking every bit the arrogant real estate developer he pretended to be. Connor had married my sister Jada 3 years ago, primarily because he believed my family possessed generational wealth. When he discovered my parents were secretly drowning in debt, he quickly realized I was the only actual millionaire in the family. Since then, he had made it his personal mission to find a way into my bank accounts. He had always used his status as a wealthy white man to intimidate my family, but I had never bowed to him. Connor clapped his hands together in a slow, mocking rhythm. He walked right past my mother Vivica, who was still visibly shaking from my public exposure of her previous financial crimes. He did not even look at the imposter Maya, who was sitting frozen in the client chair. Connor marched straight to the mahogany desk and slammed a thick black leather binder right on top of the fraudulent wire transfer authorization form. He looked around the room at the shocked bank tellers and smiled a terrifyingly smug smile. "There is no need for anyone to call the police," Connor announced, his voice dripping with absolute false authority. He adjusted his expensive silk tie and looked directly at Keisha. "I apologize for the disruption, ladies and gentlemen. My sister-in-law Zora is suffering from a severe psychotic episode. We are here today to secure her assets and get her the emergency medical intervention she desperately needs." The sheer audacity of his words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I stared at him, completely bewildered by the magnitude of the lie. I looked down at the heavy black binder he had just slammed onto the desk. The gold seal of the Fulton County Superior Court glared back at me. The title, printed in bold black ink, read, "Emergency Petition for Medical Guardianship and Conservatorship." I snatched the binder off the desk and ripped it open. My eyes scanned the pages, rapidly processing the horrific legal assassination they had orchestrated against me. I saw the signature of a corrupt judge I had never met in my entire life. I saw a comprehensive medical evaluation signed by a boutique psychiatrist known for catering to the most unethical elite families in Atlanta. The diagnosis, printed on the official medical letterhead, read, "Acute paranoid schizophrenia with severe financial delusions." According to these forged legal documents, I had been completely unraveling for the past 6 months. The paperwork claimed the pressure of running a high-level cybersecurity firm had broken my mind. It stated that I was experiencing violent paranoid delusions, making me believe my family was trying to steal from me. The final page of the document granted Connor and my father Desmond full executive control over my personal bank accounts, my corporate assets, and my medical decisions. It granted them the terrifying legal power to commit me involuntarily to a psychiatric facility. "This is a complete fabrication," I stated, keeping my voice deliberately calm. I held the fraudulent documents up in the air. "I have never seen this psychiatrist. This judge signed an emergency ex parte order without ever bringing me into a courtroom. This is a coordinated conspiracy to commit medical fraud and steal my grandmother's trust fund." Connor stepped into my personal space, using his height to try and tower over me. He leaned in close so the bank staff could not hear his next words. He smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. "It does not matter what you say, Zora," he whispered, his voice a venomous hiss. "You are a successful black woman screaming in a bank. Who do you think they are going to believe? I paid a judge $20,000 to sign that paper this morning. By the time any lawyer can get a hearing to overturn it, your grandmother's $4.5 million will be sitting in my offshore accounts. I am going to sell your cybersecurity firm for parts to save my real estate company. Jada is already picking out new diamond tennis bracelets with your money. You lost." Connor took a step back and immediately shifted his face back into a mask of deep sorrow and concern. He looked at the two armed bank security guards who had rushed over from the main lobby, drawn by the commotion. "Officers, please physically detain her," Connor commanded, gesturing toward me with a look of fake pity. "She is a danger to herself and to others. She is completely disconnected from reality. We need to hold her here safely until the private medical transport team arrives to take her to the psychiatric facility." The two large men in security uniforms approached me cautiously, resting their hands on their utility belts. They looked incredibly confused. They had seen me in this bank dozens of times conducting legitimate high-level business. But Connor was waving an official court document with a judge's signature, and my own mother was standing right there validating his lies. Vivica instantly pivoted from an angry thief to a weeping, heartbroken mother. She pulled a lace handkerchief from her designer purse and dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes. "Please, officers, be gentle with my daughter," Vivica cried out, putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. "We have been trying to get her psychiatric help for months, but she refuses to take her medication. She thinks everyone is trying to steal from her. It breaks my heart to see her like this." My father Desmond stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder, trying to physically force me back into a chair. Just comply. Zora Desmond said, his voice deep and resonant. God is testing our family today, but this is for your own good. We are saving you from yourself. Just surrender and let us take over. The twisting of religion to justify his ravenous greed made the blood pound in my ears. I slapped his hand away from my shoulder. Do not touch me, I warned him, my voice cold and sharp as glass. Keisha slammed her hands down on her keyboard and stood up from her desk, physically blocking the security guards from taking another step toward me. She pointed an angry finger right at Connor's chest. Back off, Keisha yelled, her professional banking demeanor completely vanishing. I have known this woman for 15 years. She is the smartest, most sane person I have ever met. You are not putting hands on her in my vault. This document is a fraud and you are all criminals. Connor glared at my best friend, his white privilege weaponized and ready to strike. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket. I suggest you step aside immediately, young lady. Connor threatened, his tone dripping with condescension. I am the legal conservator of the Zora estate. You are currently interfering with a highly sensitive medical and legal crisis. I play golf with the regional vice president of this bank. If you do not instruct your security guards to detain this unstable woman right now, I will make one phone call and ensure you are terminated for gross negligence and liability before lunch. Keisha did not move a single inch. She stared Connor down, completely unfazed by his threats. But I could see the security guards exchanging nervous glances. They were hourly employees caught between a wealthy white man waving a judge's signature and a black woman claiming conspiracy. The historical context of women looking like me being labeled crazy when they stand up for themselves hung heavy and suffocating in the room. Connor was banking on that exact dynamic. I knew exactly what he was doing. The horrifying reality of my situation set in like freezing water. If I fought the guards physically, they would catch the incident on the bank's security cameras. Any physical struggle would immediately validate the forged psychiatric evaluation Connor brought. They would use the footage as proof of my supposed violent paranoia. They would drag me out of this lobby in handcuffs, throw me into the back of a medical transport van, and lock me in a psychiatric ward on a mandatory 72-hour hold. By the time I could convince a doctor I was sane or get my corporate lawyers to see me, the $4.5 million would be entirely gone. My grandmother's historic legacy would vanish into an untraceable Cayman Islands account. My life's work would be seized and liquidated to cover Connor's catastrophic real estate failures. I was trapped in a perfectly executed legal assassination. I realized in that terrifying moment that I could not outmuscle them. I could not scream my way out of a medical guardianship order. I had to outsmart them using the one thing they consistently underestimated: my brilliant mind. The two security guards took another step forward. Their hands gripped the heavy black batons at their waists. They looked apologetic but resigned. Connor stood behind them, practically vibrating with glee. He held that forged medical guardianship order like a shield of absolute invincibility. He fully expected me to scream. He wanted me to lash out and validate every single lie printed on those fraudulent psychiatric documents. I took a slow, deep breath and let my hands drop to my sides. I did not fight the guards. I did not raise my voice. I took exactly one step back, creating a small pocket of space between us. Then I reached into the interior pocket of my tailored blazer and pulled out my smartphone. Connor scoffed, rolling his eyes. Who are you going to call Zora? The police are already on their way, and when they get here, they are going to see a highly unstable woman needing a psychiatric hold. Put the phone away and make this easy on yourself. I did not bother looking at him. I kept my eyes locked on my mother Vivica, who was still dabbing at her dry eyes with that ridiculous lace handkerchief. I opened a proprietary application on my phone. The screen glowed with the sleek black and silver logo of my cybersecurity firm. It was an application my engineers had custom-built specifically for this banking institution. I tapped the screen 3 times. A low mechanical hum vibrated through the polished marble floorboards. It started as a subtle vibration in the soles of my shoes and quickly escalated into a deep industrial groan. Before anyone in the VIP suite could process the sound, thick titanium blast doors slid seamlessly out of the reinforced walls. They slammed shut over the frosted glass panels of the executive office with terrifying speed. The heavy magnetic locks engaged with a deafening thud, sealing the room completely. The bright fluorescent lights overhead immediately dimmed, transitioning into a cool, ambient emergency glow. The air conditioning instantly shifted to a restricted ventilation mode, sealing off the airflow to the rest of the building. The immediate silence in the room was absolute and suffocating. Vivica gasped, dropping her designer handbag onto the plush carpet. The clasp broke, spilling her expensive lipsticks and mints across the floor. My father Desmond lunged toward the main exit. He grabbed the heavy brass handle and pulled with all his substantial weight, but the door did not budge a single inch. It was locked with thousands of pounds of magnetic force. Connor dropped his forged medical documents. His arrogant smile vanished instantly. He pulled out his own phone, his thumb frantically tapping the screen. His pale face flushed an angry shade of red as he stared at his device. "There is no signal," Connor yelled, spinning around to face the bank manager who was now backed into a corner. "Why do I not have any cell service?" I slid my phone back into my blazer pocket and smoothed down my lapels. "Did you honestly believe you could walk into a Tier 1 financial institution and steal $4.5 million without triggering a silent protocol?" I asked. I stepped closer to the center of the room, commanding the space, forcing the security guards to step back. "You spent my entire life looking down on me because I preferred coding over debutante cotillions," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sealed room. "You thought my cybersecurity firm was just some cute little tech startup that I ran out of a basement. You underestimated me because you have always underestimated Black women who refuse to shrink themselves for your comfort. My firm designed the biometric security architecture for this entire banking network. You are currently standing inside a specialized vault that requires my personal retinal scan to open from the inside." Keisha stood behind my desk, her arms crossed, radiating the exact same unbothered energy. She had completely dropped her polite banking persona. She looked at the two security guards who were now visibly sweating. "Yo, boys might want to take your hands off your belts," Keisha advised them sharply. "That lockdown overrides local branch authority. It overrides regional authority. That is federal-level security protocol. Nobody is coming through those doors until she says so." Connor banged his fist against the reinforced titanium door. "You cannot do this," he yelled. "I have a court order signed by a superior court judge granting me guardianship over your estate. This is illegal detainment. This is kidnapping. You are proving my exact point about your mental instability." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that echoed in the sealed room, making the imposter Maya flinch in her chair. "A piece of paper signed by a corrupt judge means absolutely nothing when you are locked inside a Faraday cage, Connor," I said, pacing slowly toward him. "There is no cellular signal in this room anymore. No outgoing radio frequencies. You cannot call your lawyers. You cannot call the judge you bribed this morning. You cannot even call my sister Jada to tell her that your pathetic plan to save your failing real estate business just blew up in your face." Connor gritted his teeth, his white privilege completely neutralized by walls of solid titanium. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I am going to sue you into oblivion. I am going to have you locked in a padded room for the rest of your life." "You are going to federal prison," I corrected him smoothly. "You brought forged medical documents into a federally insured bank to facilitate wire fraud. And because you are trapped in here with me, the actual police have time to arrive, review the security footage, and arrest you before you can run to your high-priced defense attorneys." My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest again, trying to salvage his shattered pride. He adjusted his suit jacket and tried to put on his best church deacon voice. "Zora, open this door immediately," Desmond commanded, pointing a stern finger at the exit. "You are embarrassing this family. We can handle this privately at home like adults. We can pray on this. God is testing us today, but we do not need to involve the authorities." I turned my gaze to my father, feeling a fresh wave of disgust wash over me. "Do not invoke God to cover up your greed, Dad." I shook my head, crossing my arms. "We are not handling anything privately. You only use the word family when you want to extract resources from me. You want me to open that door so you can walk away from the consequences of trying to steal my grandmother's legacy. You'll want to go back to your country club and pretend you are a wealthy, respected businessman while you secretly plot to drain my accounts. Vivica stepped up beside my father, her fake tears completely gone. She glared at me with raw, unmasked resentment. You are a selfish, ungrateful child, she spat out. We gave you everything. We put a roof over your head. I bought the roof over your head, I fired back, matching her intensity. I paid off the mortgage on that house in Alpharetta 3 years ago. I paid for the cars you drove here in. I paid for the designer suit Dad is wearing and the bag you just dropped on the floor. I gave you everything and your response was to hire a body double to rob me blind. I turned my attention to the woman sitting frozen in the client chair. The woman wearing my trench coat and my hairstyle. Up close, the resemblance was genuinely terrifying. She had the same slope of the nose, the same high cheekbones. It was not just good makeup or a talented actress. The bone structure was undeniably familiar. I walked slowly toward the desk, placing both hands flat on the mahogany surface, leaning in close to the imposter. The woman swallowed hard, shrinking back against the leather upholstery. She looked terrified, her eyes darting toward my mother for help. But Vivica turned her face away, her jaw clenched tight with silent fury. I have access to facial recognition databases that the federal government uses to track international fugitives. I warned the imposter, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If you do not tell me exactly who you are and how much they paid you to steal my identity, I will ensure you spend the next 2 decades in a federal penitentiary for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The imposter let out a ragged sob. Tears spilled over her eyelashes, ruining her perfect makeup. I watched the tough facade crumble completely. She was not a hardened criminal. She was someone they had manipulated. And looking closely at her features, I felt a sudden sickening realization wash over me as I recognized the shape of her eyes. They were the exact same eyes that stared back at me when I looked at my father. The heavy titanium doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, releasing the suffocating tension that had built inside the vault. The red and blue emergency lights from the police cruisers parked on the street cast harsh shadows across the polished marble lobby. Officer Jenkins stepped through the threshold, followed by 2 armed deputies. Keisha immediately handed him the fraudulent wire transfer documents and the fake blue passport. "Nobody moves," Officer Jenkins commanded, his voice cutting through the heavy air. He looked at the scene before him. My mother adjusting her designer jacket, my father sweating profusely, Connor clutching his forged medical binder, and the woman sitting in the chair wearing my face. Officer I stepped forward, my voice steady and commanding. These individuals just attempted to wire $4.5 million out of my locked trust account. The woman in the chair presented that forged passport. I want her fingerprinted right now. Desmond panicked. He lunged forward, placing his body between the police and the imposter. "Officer, this is a massive misunderstanding," my father pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "She is just a confused young woman. We hired her for a harmless family prank. There is no need for fingerprints or arrests. We can handle this privately." A family prank. The sheer absurdity of the lie made my blood boil. I looked at Desmond, watching the sweat bead on his forehead. He was not protecting a hired actress. He was protecting his own blood. "A prank that involves federal wire fraud and identity theft," I said, crossing my arms. "Officer Jenkins, my firm, upgrades the biometric software for the Atlanta Police Department. I know you have the mobile rapid identification scanner in your vehicle. Bring it in. Scan her." Officer Jenkins nodded to his deputy, who jogged out to the cruiser. Vivica stood perfectly still, her face a mask of cold fury. She did not look at my father. She did not look at the crying woman in the chair. She glared exclusively at me, radiating pure hatred. The deputy returned moments later, carrying a sleek black biometric tablet. He approached the imposter. "Place your right index finger on the glass, miss," he ordered. Maya hesitated, her hands trembling so violently she could barely lift her arm. She looked up at Desmond, her eyes wide with terror. "Dad, please," she whimpered. "You said I would not get in trouble. You promised." The word echoed off the glass walls of the VIP suite. "Dad." The deputy pressed her trembling finger onto the illuminated green glass of the scanner. The machine beeped twice. A green light flashed and the screen populated with her federal identification record. Officer Jenkins read the screen aloud, his tone completely professional. Maya Thomas, age 28. No prior criminal record. He scrolled down, tapping the screen. Next of kin listed on file. Father. Desmond Thomas. The truth dropped into the room like a live grenade. The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the hum of the air conditioning kicking back online. I turned my head slowly to look at my father. The man who had spent my entire childhood lecturing me about moral superiority, about upholding the family image, about presenting a flawless facade to our church congregation. He had a secret 28-year-old daughter, a product of a decades-old affair, a living, breathing consequence of his infidelity, who just happened to share my exact bone structure. You hypocrite, I whispered, the words slicing through the quiet room. You spent my entire life making me feel like I was not good enough for this family. You told me my career was a joke. You demanded perfection. And all this time you had an illegitimate child hidden away in the shadows. Desmond could not meet my gaze. He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. It was a mistake, he mumbled weakly. It happened a long time ago. I paid child support quietly. I kept it separate from our lives to protect your mother. I was trying to protect the family. Protect the family, I snapped, stepping toward him. You brought her into my bank to steal my inheritance. That is not protection. That is theft. I pivoted to face Vivica. I expected to see a shattered wife. I expected tears of betrayal or a scream of outrage. Instead, my mother stood with her posture rigid, adjusting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. Her expression was completely devoid of shock. You knew, I stated, the realization hitting me with sickening clarity. You knew about her. Vivica lifted her chin, looking down her nose at me with a level of arrogance that defied logic. Of course I knew, she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. Did you really think your father could hide a child from me? I found out about Maya when she was 10 years old. I saw the bank statements. I saw the child support payments draining our accounts. And you stayed with him? I asked, genuinely baffled. You stayed with a man who betrayed you, and then you teamed up with his mistress's daughter to rob me. Vivica erupted, her carefully constructed socialite persona shattering completely. I stayed because I had a lifestyle to maintain, Zora. Do you have any idea what a divorce would have done to my standing at the country club? Do you know the humiliation I would have faced in front of my friends? I built a flawless image. I was not going to let a cheating husband and his bastard child strip me of my social status. She pointed an angry, manicured finger at me. But then Connor started bleeding money. Your golden sister Jada married a man who pretends to be a real estate mogul, but actually builds bankrupt luxury condos. Connor lost millions last year. The bank was threatening to foreclose on our house in Alpharetta. We were weeks away from total financial ruin, and there you sat hoarding a $4.5 million trust fund from your grandmother. A grandmother who always hated me. The pieces of their twisted puzzle locked together in my mind. The sheer malice of their plan was breathtaking. So you tracked down the illegitimate daughter, I said, piecing it together aloud. You realized she looked exactly like me. You paid for her fake passport. You orchestrated this entire heist. You traded your dignity for a payday. It was practical, Vivica hissed, defending her criminal actions without a shred of remorse. Maya was drowning in student loan debt. Desmond promised to pay off her loans if she played her part. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. You have more money than you could ever spend, Zora. You own a corporate tower. You do not need your grandmother's trust fund. You are just greedy. Greedy, I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I paid your mortgage for 3 years. I bought the cars you drove here in. I paid for Jada's tuition when she partied her way through college. You are calling me greedy, while you literally stand in my bank vault committing federal fraud with your husband's secret love child. Officer Jenkins pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. That is enough, he commanded. He grabbed Maya's trembling arms and locked her wrists together behind her back. Maya Thomas, you are under arrest for identity theft and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Maya sobbed uncontrollably, her knees buckling as the deputy held her upright. She looked at Desmond, begging him to save her, but my father just turned his face away, cowardly, abandoning her, just as he had emotionally abandoned me my entire life. Arrest them too, I told Officer Jenkins, pointing directly at Vivica and Desmond. They orchestrated the entire thing. They are co-conspirators. Before the officers could move, Connor stepped aggressively into the center of the room. He had been waiting for his moment, watching the family drama unfold with cold calculation. He slapped his thick black leather binder against the mahogany desk, producing a loud crack that silenced the room. "Nobody is arresting my in-laws," Connor declared, his voice echoing with arrogant white privilege. He shoved the binder toward Officer Jenkins. "Read the paperwork, officer. I am the legally appointed medical conservator for Zora. I have a court order signed by a superior court judge this morning. Zora is experiencing a documented psychotic break. She is paranoid and delusional." Connor looked at me, a malicious smirk spreading across his face. My in-laws were not trying to steal anything. They were acting under my legal authority as her conservator to transfer her assets into a secure medical trust for her own protection. Maya is simply a private healthcare contractor we hired to facilitate the transfer because Zora refused to cooperate with her psychiatric treatment. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I realized they had rehearsed this exact contingency plan. They had paid a corrupt judge to sign an emergency medical guardianship order, effectively creating a legal shield against immediate criminal charges for my parents. Officer Jenkins reviewed the documents, his brow furrowed in frustration. He recognized a fraudulent scheme when he saw one, but his hands were tied by the official judicial seal stamped on the front page. "Ma'am," Officer Jenkins said, looking at me with genuine regret. "This is a signed court order granting them financial and medical guardianship. Until you get a lawyer to strike this down in front of a judge, I cannot arrest them for attempting to move the funds under this authority. I can only take the imposter into custody for the fake passport." Vivica smoothed the front of her designer blazer, a triumphant sneer, replacing her earlier panic. "I told you, Zora. You always overreact. We are just trying to get you the psychiatric help you desperately need." Desmond finally looked up, his spine straightening as he realized he was going to walk out of the bank in a tailored suit instead of handcuffs. "Let us go," Connor instructed my parents, acting like a victorious general, leading his troops off a battlefield. "We have a lot of work to do." They walked toward the open titanium doors, leaving Maya weeping in police custody. But as Connor passed me, he stopped. He leaned in close, his cologne mixing with the stale air of the bank vault. "You might have blocked the wire transfer today," Connor whispered, his voice a dark, threatening rasp. "And you might think you won because you exposed a family secret. But you are too late to save the one thing you actually care about." I stared at him, my face perfectly still, refusing to give him the reaction he craved. "Your grandmother's historic brownstone in Harlem," Connor sneered. "Jada and I used the guardianship papers to bypass the final notice period. We legally foreclosed on the debt this morning. We are hosting a massive Sunday dinner there tomorrow to announce our new luxury condo development to the entire family. Enjoy your empty bank vault, Zora." He turned and walked away, his arrogant laughter bouncing off the marble walls of the lobby. Keisha stepped up beside me, watching them leave. Her fists were clenched tight at her sides. "Are you going to let that mediocre man tear down your grandmother's house?" Keisha asked, her voice shaking with rage. I watched the glass doors swing shut behind them. A cold, calculating calm washed over my entire body. "No," I replied, turning to face my best friend. "I am going to let him throw his little party. I want all of them in one room. I want them to celebrate their fake victory. And then I am going to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from a woman who owns the very ground you stand on." "Get your coat, Keisha. We have a Sunday dinner to crash." I walked out of the bank with Keisha right beside me, leaving the flashing police lights and the chaotic marble lobby behind us. The warm Atlanta afternoon sun hit my face, but my blood felt like ice. I did not shed a single tear over my father's secret daughter or my mother's treacherous deception. Crying was a luxury for people who had time to waste, and right now I was on a clock. Connor thought he had delivered a fatal blow by targeting my grandmother's brownstone. I thought he could use my supposed mental breakdown to bulldoze the only piece of my childhood that held any real love. He was about to learn that you do not declare war on a digital forensics expert unless you are prepared to have your entire life dismantled line by line of code. We got into my car, and I immediately locked the doors. The heavy silence of the luxury sedan isolated us from the busy downtown street. Keisha turned to me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and absolute rage. She buckled her seatbelt and shook her head. They actually did it, Keisha said, her voice tight. They actually found a corrupt judge and paid him off to declare you insane. Zora, they are trying to erase you completely. I started the engine and merged aggressively into the traffic, heading straight for my corporate headquarters in Buckhead. They are trying to erase my grandmother's legacy, I corrected, keeping my eyes fixed on the road. The 4.5 million in the bank vault was just liquid cash. But that brownstone in Harlem is different. My grandmother worked 3 jobs for 30 years to pay off that mortgage. She hosted civil rights organizers in that living room. She bought me my very first desktop computer and set it up in the parlor so I could learn how to code when my parents told me technology was a waste of time. Vivica always hated that house because it reminded her of the working-class roots she tried so hard to bury. Now Jada and Connor want to tear it down to build sterile luxury condos for arrogant tech bros. Keisha pulled out her tablet, linking it to my car's secure network. How did Connor even foreclose on it? Keisha asked, her fingers flying across the digital keyboard. The property was fully paid off. There was no mortgage for him to default on. That is exactly what we are going to find out, I replied, pressing my foot down on the accelerator. 10 minutes later, we strode through the glass doors of my corporate building. The security guards nodded respectfully as I bypassed the reception desk and took the private elevator directly to the top floor. The executive suite of my firm is essentially a high-tech war room. Wall-to-wall digital screens monitor global cyber threats, and a dozen of the sharpest forensic analysts in the country sit at modular workstations. I walked straight to the lead desk, where Malik, my chief investigator, was already deep into a server analysis. Malik is a brilliant, quiet man who can trace a hidden offshore account through 5 shell companies in under 20 minutes. He took one look at my face and immediately closed out his current project. "Drop everything, Malik," I commanded, pulling off my blazer and tossing it onto a chair. "I need you to pull every single public registry filing, property deed, and shadow lending contract tied to Connor and his real estate development group. Look for any transaction initiated within the last 48 hours involving a historic property in Harlem." Malik did not ask questions. He simply cracked his knuckles and began typing at a blistering pace. The massive screen at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying a complex web of financial transactions, corporate registrations, and real estate deeds. Keisha stood next to me, crossing her arms as we watched the data populate in real time. It took Malik exactly 14 minutes to find the smoking gun. "Got it," Malik announced, pointing a laser pen at a heavily redacted financial document projected on the wall. Connor did not buy a pre-existing debt on the brownstone Zora. He created the debt. He used the forged medical power of attorney he got this morning to take out a $3 million line of credit against your grandmother's property. I stared at the screen, analyzing the mechanics of his fraud. So he leveraged my property to borrow $3 million. Who gave him the loan? A private equity group called Apex Capital Solutions. Malik read from the screen. They are a predatory shadow lender, known for high-interest short-term bridge loans. Connor authorized the loan under your name, using his fake guardianship status. Then an hour later, he intentionally triggered a default clause in the contract. "I deliberately defaulted on the loan he just took out?" Keisha asked, her face twisting in confusion. "Why would he do that?" "Because of who bought the distressed debt," I answered, a cold realization settling in my bones. Malik traced the LLC that purchased the defaulted loan from Apex Capital. Malik typed another rapid sequence of commands. A new corporate registration popped onto the screen. "The buyer is listed as Horizon Urban Ventures," Malik stated. "Let me guess," I said, my jaw clenching. Horizon Urban Ventures is a shell company registered in Delaware, entirely owned by Connor and Jada. "Spot on," Malik confirmed, bringing up the corporate ownership documents. "Connor used your name to borrow the money defaulted on the loan, and then used his own shell company to buy the property in foreclosure for pennies on the dollar. It is a highly sophisticated wash trading scheme. He essentially stole your $3 million house and transferred the deed to himself legally, washing the title through the foreclosure process." "He thinks he is a genius," Keisha muttered, shaking her head in disgust. "He thinks because he used a judge to sign the guardianship order, his financial maneuvering is completely untouchable." Connor made two catastrophic miscalculations, I said, stepping up to the glowing digital screen and tracing the financial web with my finger. First, he assumed I would be locked inside a padded cell right now, heavily sedated and unable to fight back. Second, he assumed I would try to fight him in family court. I am not going to family court. I am going to buy the battlefield. I turned to Malik. Apex Capital Solutions, the predatory lender Connor used. Pull up their corporate health profile. Are they solvent? Malik pulled up a rapid financial diagnostic of the private equity firm. Not even close, Malik replied. Apex is heavily overleveraged. They are currently seeking a massive liquidity injection to avoid declaring bankruptcy by the end of the quarter. They are desperate for cash. I smiled, and it was a terrifyingly calm expression. Contact my corporate acquisitions team immediately, I instructed. I want my holding company to initiate a hostile takeover of Apex Capital Solutions. Offer them a cash buyout at 20% above their current market valuation. Tell them the offer is contingent upon immediate execution and transfer of all their active debt portfolios directly to me. Keisha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she realized what I was doing. Zora, if you buy the lending agency that holds the original debt, you become the ultimate master lien holder. Exactly, I said, turning back to the screen. Connor thinks he legally transferred the deed to his shell company. But if I buy the shadow lender, I have the legal authority to invalidate the debt transfer due to suspected fraud. I can freeze his shell company assets and repossess the physical property immediately. My acquisitions team worked with ruthless efficiency. For the next 5 hours, my office transformed into a high-stakes financial command center. Corporate lawyers drafted emergency buyout contracts. Wire transfers in the tens of millions were routed through secure channels. By 9 o'clock that evening, the ink was dry on the digital contracts. My holding company officially owned Apex Capital Solutions. I now held the master deed to my grandmother's brownstone, and I held the toxic debt that was about to bankrupt Connor's entire real estate empire. Malik print the certified eviction and repossession notice I ordered, leaning over his desk. Make it official. I want the corporate seal on it. The heavy laser printer in the corner of the room hummed to life, sliding a pristine white document into the tray. I picked it up, feeling the warmth of the fresh ink against my fingertips. It was the legal instrument of their destruction. We have one more thing to prepare, I told Keisha, sliding the eviction notice into my sleek leather briefcase. Connor mentioned they are hosting a massive Sunday dinner at the brownstone tomorrow to announce their luxury condo development. I want to see exactly what we are walking into. I walked over to my personal workstation and opened a secure backdoor program. 2 years ago, when my grandmother was still alive, I had personally installed a state-of-the-art smart home security system in the Harlem brownstone to ensure she was always safe. I integrated the interior cameras, the climate control, and the smart locks onto a private encrypted server. When Jada and Connor took over the property, they were far too arrogant and technologically illiterate to change the master administrative privileges. They simply assumed they had locked me out by changing the physical keys. I punched in my master override codes. The large screen on the wall split into 4 high-definition live camera feeds showing the interior of the brownstone. My breath caught slightly in my throat as I looked at my grandmother's parlor. The beautiful vintage furniture had been shoved into the corner covered with plastic tarps. The elegant floral wallpaper was being stripped away. In the center of the large dining room, an expensive catering crew was busy setting up long banquet tables draped in white silk. Massive floral arrangements of white lilies and orchids, Jada's favorite flowers, were being positioned around the room. On the camera feed showing the kitchen, I saw my sister Jada. She was wearing a designer silk robe holding a crystal flute of champagne, laughing loudly on her cell phone. She looked completely carefree, entirely unburdened by the fact that her husband had just tried to have me locked in a psychiatric ward. She was standing in the very kitchen where my grandmother used to bake peach cobbler, sipping champagne and planning my erasure. I watched her for a long moment, letting the reality of her betrayal burn away any lingering hesitation in my heart. She was not a victim of my parents' manipulation. She was an active, eager participant. Are we taking security with us tomorrow? Keisha asked, watching the live feed over my shoulder. No, I said, closing the laptop with a decisive snap. I am not hiding behind guards. I am walking through the front door, and I am going to let them look me in the eye when I take everything away from them. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow I would put on my sharpest designer suit. I would step into the house that rightfully belonged to me. I would stand in front of their elite friends, their country club associates, and the church gossips. I was going to serve an eviction notice cold and hard in the middle of their celebration. The trap was set, the weapons were armed, and the Golden family was about to experience the most devastating Sunday dinner of their lives. By Sunday afternoon, my private jet had touched down at Teterboro Airport, and Keisha and I were sitting in the back of a black town car, speeding toward Manhattan. The timeline was incredibly tight, but my acquisitions team had worked through the night to finalize the hostile takeover of Apex Capital Solutions. I now held the master deed to my grandmother's Harlem brownstone securely inside my sleek leather briefcase. Connor and Jada had moved aggressively, planning their massive Sunday dinner just 24 hours after their failed bank heist in Atlanta. They wanted to publicly plant their flag on the property and secure investors for their luxury condo development before the workweek began. They were completely unaware that the ground they were preparing to celebrate on no longer belonged to them. The town car turned on to my grandmother's historic block in Harlem. The street, which was usually quiet and deeply rooted in community history, was entirely clogged with luxury vehicles and aggressive valet drivers. Connor had spared no expense to showcase his newly stolen wealth. Men in sharp suits and women in extravagant Sunday church hats were climbing the stone steps of the brownstone. I looked out the tinted window of the car and felt a sharp, visceral spike of anger. My grandmother had spent her entire life protecting that house from gentrifying developers, keeping its historic integrity intact. Now her own son and granddaughter were hosting a catered networking event to tear it down. I stepped out of the town car wearing a flawless emerald green designer suit that fit like armor. My heels struck the pavement with absolute authority. Keisha stepped out right beside me, matching my energy perfectly, in a sharp tailored dress holding her own briefcase. The valet rushed forward, attempting to redirect us toward the guest check-in podium set up on the sidewalk. I did not even look at him. I walked straight past the velvet ropes and climbed the familiar stone steps of my childhood sanctuary. The heavy mahogany front doors were thrown wide open. The moment I crossed the threshold, the sheer disrespect of their renovations hit me. The beautiful antique furniture my grandmother had collected for decades was shoved into corners and covered with cheap plastic tarps. The original crown molding was partially stripped. In the center of the massive living room stood a glossy presentation easel displaying architectural blueprints for a sterile glass and steel condominium complex. Jada had already renamed it the Vivica Lofts, completely erasing my grandmother's name from the legacy. The room was packed with the elite members of my parents' social circle. Deacons from their church, local politicians, and wealthy country club investors mingled while holding crystal champagne flutes. Caterers circulated with modernized, gentrified versions of traditional soul food. It was a perfectly orchestrated performance of fake generational wealth. I stood in the entryway observing the crowd. It did not take long for people to notice me. The lively jazz music playing through the sound system seemed to fade into the background as heads began to turn. The conversations closest to the door died out instantly, replaced by a wave of hushed, nervous whispers. My Aunt Shirley was the first to approach me. She was wearing an oversized yellow church hat and a deeply sympathetic expression. She reached out and patted my arm, treating me like I was made of fragile glass. Zora, baby, Aunt Shirley cooed, her voice dripping with condescending pity. Vivica told us you were resting at a private medical facility in Georgia. We have all been praying for your mental recovery. It is a blessing they let you out for a day pass to be with family. I looked at my aunt, realizing just how efficiently my mother had poisoned the well. Vivica had weaponized the forged medical documents from the bank heist, deploying a tragic narrative to her entire social network. She had painted herself as the heartbroken mother dealing with a severely mentally ill daughter to garner sympathy and explain my sudden exclusion from the family finances. I am not on a day pass, Aunt Shirley, I replied, my voice carrying a terrifying calm that made her take a step back. and my mind is sharper than it has ever been. Before Aunt Shirley could process my response, Vivica materialized from the crowd. My mother was wearing a stunning white silk dress, playing the role of the elegant grieving matriarch to perfection. When she saw me standing in the foyer, the fake smile instantly vanished from her face. Raw panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a look of extreme maternal concern. She rushed forward, grabbing my forearm and digging her manicured nails into my skin in a silent, desperate warning. "Zora, what are you doing here?" Vivica hissed through clenched teeth, keeping her voice low so the nearby guests would not hear. "We have important investors here today. You are going to ruin your sister's presentation. You need to leave immediately before Connor calls the police." I looked down at her hand gripping my arm, and then looked directly into her eyes. "Take your hands off me, Mom," I commanded. My voice was not a whisper. It was loud enough to slice through the ambient noise of the party. Several guests turned to look at us, their eyes wide with curiosity. Desmond appeared right behind my mother, his face flushed an angry shade of red. He stepped into my path, trying to use his broad shoulders to physically block me from entering the main dining area. "Zora, you are experiencing an my father declared, raising his voice just enough to ensure the church deacons nearby could hear him, setting the stage for my removal. "You are not thinking clearly. Let me escort you to a quiet room so we can give you your medication. We do not want you to embarrass yourself in front of our guests." I did not move. I stood my ground, looking at the man who had brought a secret illegitimate daughter into my bank just 24 hours prior to steal my money. "I do not take medication, Dad," I said, projecting absolute unbothered authority. "But you are going to need blood pressure pills by the time this afternoon is over. Step aside." Jada finally noticed the commotion and pushed her way through the crowd of investors. My sister looked like she had stepped off the cover of a bridal magazine, wearing a designer dress that cost more than her husband's entire liquid net worth. She was dripping in Cartier jewelry, the exact same diamond bracelets I had purchased for her 5th wedding anniversary when Connor's credit cards kept declining. She marched up to me with a look of supreme arrogance, completely confident in her new status as the supposed owner of the property. "What is she doing here?" Jada demanded, looking at our parents as if I were a stray dog that had wandered into her immaculate home. Connor specifically instructed security not to let her inside. Jada turned her attention to me, crossing her arms over her chest. "Look, Zora, I know you are confused and struggling with your reality right now. But this is a business event for stable adults. We are securing millions in funding today for the new development. You cannot be here wearing a power suit pretending you are still a CEO. You are legally incapacitated." She reached over to a passing caterer, snatched a cheap plastic plate from the bottom of his tray and shoved it toward my chest. "If you are hungry, go eat in the kitchen with the staff." Jada ordered, her voice dripping with cruel superiority. "This table is for family members who are legally sound and actually contribute to the family legacy. We do not have the patience to deal with your delusions today." I looked at the flimsy plastic plate she was trying to force into my hands. I looked at the extravagant spread of food on the dining table, and then at the architectural blueprints designed to erase my grandmother from existence. The sheer audacity of her entitlement after everything I had done for her, after everything I had paid for, ignited a cold, calculated fire in my blood. I was not going to play the polite professional sister anymore. The time for maintaining appearances was officially over. I looked at the flimsy plastic plate she was trying to force into my hands. I looked at the extravagant spread of food on the dining table, and then at the architectural blueprints designed to erase my grandmother from existence. The sheer audacity of her entitlement, after everything I had done for her, after everything I had paid for, ignited a cold, calculated fire in my blood. I was not going to play the polite professional sister anymore. The time for maintaining appearances was officially over. I raised my hand and slapped the plastic plate away. The sound of the cheap plastic hitting the original hardwood floor cracked like a gunshot through the sudden silence of the room. The catering staff froze in their tracks. The wealthy investors paused with their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths. Jada gasped, clutching her chest, as if I had physically struck her, stepping back in genuine shock. "You want to talk to me about being legally sound, Jada?" I projected my voice so clearly that it bounced off the high ceilings of the brownstone. You want to stand in my grandmother's house wearing the Cartier diamonds I bought for you and treat me like the help. How about we talk about how legally sound you were 4 years ago? Vivica rushed forward, her hands waving frantically. Zora, stop this right now. You are having a delusion. Someone call the medical transport team. She is completely out of control. I ignored my mother, stepping directly into Jada's personal space, forcing her to back up against her own presentation easel. Do you want to tell your elite social circle the truth, Jada? I demanded. Do you want to tell these fine church deacons and these luxury real estate investors about the time I had to quietly wire $50,000 to your sorority chapter to keep you out of federal prison? Jada's jaw dropped, her perfectly applied lip gloss parting in silent horror. The guests around us began to murmur, exchanging shocked glances and pulling their phones out of their pockets. That is right, I continued, refusing to let her breathe. You embezzled $50,000 from your own sisters to fund your fake luxury lifestyle because your husband was already drowning in bad debt. You were facing grand larceny charges. Mom and Dad came crying to my office begging me to save the family name. I wrote the check that kept you out of handcuffs. And what did you do the very next weekend, Jada? You took your little friends out to brunch on my dime and mocked me. You sat there laughing about how I was just a bitter, ugly nerd wasting my life on a pathetic tech startup while you were living the dream. That is a lie. Jada stammered, her voice trembling as she looked desperately around the room at her wealthy friends. She is crazy. Do not listen to her. Connor, show them the medical papers. Connor was standing near the fireplace looking like a trapped animal. He made no move to produce his forged documents because he knew exactly what was coming next. It is not a lie, I said, turning to face the crowd of investors. I have the bank transfer receipts, the sealed legal settlement, and the signed non-disclosure agreement. My sister is a thief who uses other people's money to fund her delusions of grandeur. Just like she and her husband are trying to use your investment capital today for a condominium project they do not even own. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The wealthy investors who had been cheerfully discussing profit margins just moments ago suddenly looked furious. They began setting their champagne glasses down on the antique side tables, whispering aggressively to their partners. I was destroying their financial credibility in real time and stripping away the flawless golden child facade my parents had spent 30 years building. That is enough! Desmond bellowed, his voice booming with the practiced authority of a man who was used to silencing his household. My father pushed his way to the center of the room, his face tight with furious indignation. He stood between me and Jada, playing the role of the righteous patriarch defending his flock. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Desmond quoted, pointing a thick finger directly at my face. You will not come into my house on the Lord's Day and spew this venom. You have lost your way, Zora. You have let money and secular ambition poison your soul. I demand that you leave my property immediately before I have you arrested for trespassing. I looked at the man who had secretly fathered a child behind my mother's back and then used that same illegitimate daughter to commit identity theft at my bank. The audacity of him standing in my grandmother's house quoting scripture to me was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I threw my head back and laughed. It was a cold, commanding laugh that completely unsettled the room. Even Keisha, who stood faithfully at my side, let out a sharp chuckle of disbelief. Your property, I asked, stepping right up to my father's pointing finger. I think you need to check the public registry, Dad. I reached my hand back. Keisha seamlessly unclasped her briefcase and placed a thick certified document into my palm. I held the paperwork high in the air so the gold corporate seal caught the light of the crystal chandelier overhead. I walked past my father, entirely dismissing his physical presence. I stepped right up to the massive dining table covered in its white silk tablecloth and expensive catered food. With a swift, aggressive motion, I slammed the certified document right down on top of the blueprints for the Vivica lofts. The heavy thud made the crystal glasses rattle. I did not come here to eat your dry macaroni and cheese, I announced, my voice ringing with absolute finality. I came to serve a formal eviction notice. Desmond stared at this document, his righteous anger faltering. Connor finally moved, rushing over to the table to snatch the paper. He scanned the legal text, his eyes darting frantically across the page. His face drained of all color, leaving him looking like a ghost in a tailored suit. "What is this?" Connor muttered, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled. "This is impossible. We foreclosed on the debt yesterday. Horizon Urban Ventures owns this deed. We bought it from Apex Capital." "You tried to buy it from Apex Capital," I corrected him smoothly. "But you see, Connor, when you use forged medical documents to take out a fraudulent $3 million shadow loan and then intentionally default on it, you leave a very clear digital footprint. You thought you were running a brilliant wash trading scheme to steal my grandmother's house and wash the title through your own shell company." I leaned over the table, getting right in his face. "But you miscalculated. Apex Capital Solutions was heavily overleveraged and desperate for cash. So last night, my corporate holding company initiated a hostile takeover. I bought Apex Capital, Connor. I bought the entire predatory lending agency you used to facilitate your fraud." The guests in the room began to physically back away from my family, sensing the catastrophic legal and financial collapse happening right in front of them. The investors who had been promised massive returns on the condo development were now staring at Connor with open hostility. "Because I own the lending agency. I own the original debt," I explained, making sure my mother and father heard every single word. "And as the master lien holder, I invalidated your fraudulent deed transfer this morning. My company has frozen your shell accounts pending a federal investigation into your wire fraud. I am the sole legal owner of this historic brownstone." Connor dropped the eviction notice onto the table as if it had burned his fingers. He looked at Jada, who was now openly crying, realizing her entire luxurious lifestyle was built on a foundation of sand that had just been washed away. "You have 24 hours to vacate my property," I told my father, staring him down. "You will remove yourselves your fraudulent blueprints and your fake entitlement from my grandmother's house. If there is a single person remaining on these premises by tomorrow morning, I will have the police drag you out in handcuffs for criminal trespassing. And unlike your fake medical documents, my eviction notice is backed by a legitimate federal court order." Vivica let out a wailing sob, clutching Desmond's arm. "You cannot do this to us, Zora," she cried, dropping the angry matriarch act and shifting instantly into a begging victim. "Where will Jada and Connor go? They put everything they had into this development. We are family. You cannot throw your own blood out onto the street." I picked up my briefcase and turned my back on them. "You stopped being my family the moment you walked into that bank," I said without looking over my shoulder. "Enjoy the rest of your party. It is the last one you will ever throw on my dime." The sudden barking laugh that erupted from Connor bounced off the exposed brick walls, but it lacked its usual confident ring. It was the frantic, loud laugh of a cornered animal trying to project dominance. He snatched the eviction notice off the silk tablecloth and crumpled it in his fist, holding it up for the crowd to see. "You actually think you can walk in here with a fake piece of paper and scare me?" Connor shouted, pointing a finger at me. He turned to the crowd of wealthy investors and church deacons, spreading his arms wide, playing the victimized host. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse my sister-in-law. As I mentioned earlier, she is currently under a medical conservatorship. Her mind is completely gone. My development group, Horizon Urban Ventures, holds the absolute legal deed to this property. We bought it fair and square." I did not raise my voice, but I made sure my tone carried the chilling precision of a digital forensics expert dismantling a firewall. "You did not buy anything fair and square, Connor," I stated, taking a slow, measured step toward him. "Horizon Urban Ventures has not turned a profit in 4 years. Your last 3 commercial builds in Midtown were halted due to unpaid contractor liens. Your corporate bank accounts are consistently overdrawn. You are a walking financial disaster wearing a bespoke Italian suit. You did not have $3 million in liquid capital to buy the distressed debt on this brownstone from Apex Capital Solutions." Connor sneered, adjusting his collar, his white privilege acting as an invisible shield he desperately wanted to rely on. "I secured private financing. That is how real estate works, Zora. Not that a glorified computer hacker would understand high-level commercial leverage." The investors in the room were watching us intensely. They were men and women who moved millions of dollars before breakfast, and they could smell blood in the water. I turned to face them directly, making sure my next words destroyed any chance Connor had of ever securing a single dime of their money. He secured a shadow loan, I announced to the crowd, making sure every syllable hit its mark. He went to a predatory, unregulated lending agency because not a single legitimate bank in the state of Georgia would approve his credit. But Apex Capital Solutions still required high-value collateral for a $3 million bridge loan. Connor did not have any assets left to pledge. His cars are leased, his home is mortgaged to the hilt, so he had to find someone else to take on the catastrophic financial risk. I pivoted back to my parents. Vivica and Desmond were standing near the fireplace looking confused and incredibly defensive. They still believed Connor was the wealthy savior who had elevated our family status. They still thought I was the jealous, bitter outcast trying to ruin a beautiful Sunday dinner. Dad, I said, keeping my eyes locked on my father. 2 weeks ago, Connor asked you and Mom to sign some standard investment paperwork. He told you it was a routine background check to list you as silent partners on his new luxury condo project. He told you it would guarantee you a massive return on your investment, allowing you to finally retire in absolute luxury. Desmond puffed out his chest, his face flushing with righteous indignation. My son-in-law presented us with a magnificent financial opportunity, Zora. Something you never bothered to do for this family despite all your supposed tech money. Connor is making sure your mother and I are taken care of for the rest of our lives. He respects the family hierarchy. I nodded slowly, letting his arrogant ignorance hang in the air for a brief second before pulling the rug out from under him completely. I did not make you silent partners, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a harsh register that somehow filled the entire room. He made you the primary guarantors. The paperwork you and Mom blindly signed without letting a real lawyer review it was a total asset collateralization agreement. Connor pledged your entire retirement portfolio, your life insurance policies, and the equity on your house in Alpharetta to secure his shadow loan from Apex Capital. The silence in the grand dining room became absolutely suffocating. The clinking of crystal champagne glasses stopped completely. The quiet jazz music playing in the background suddenly sounded completely out of place. Vivica let out a short, nervous breath. Her hands fluttered up to her pearl necklace. That is ridiculous, Zora. Connor would never do that. We have millions in our retirement accounts. We built that wealth over decades. Connor is a highly successful developer. He does not need our money. I looked at my mother, feeling a strange mix of pity and absolute disgust for her willful blindness. I pulled another document from my briefcase. This one was thick, printed on heavy legal paper. I tossed it onto the dining table right next to the spot where Connor had crumpled the eviction notice. I own Apex Capital now, Mom, I said, pointing at the thick stack of paper. Which means I own the loan Connor intentionally defaulted on yesterday. I have the entire financial ledger right here. Your retirement accounts are completely empty. They were drained yesterday afternoon to cover the penalty fees when Connor triggered the default clause to wash the property deed through his shell company. The bank in Alpharetta is already preparing the foreclosure notices for your house because your equity was wiped out in the transfer. Desmond staggered backward, bumping hard against the marble fireplace. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen in him before. He looked at Connor, expecting his golden son-in-law to laugh it off, to tell them I was lying and that the money was perfectly safe. Connor, tell her she is lying, Desmond demanded, his voice shaking with sudden panic. Tell her you did not touch our retirement funds. Tell her the money is secure. Connor refused to look at my father. He stared at the original hardwood floor, his jaw clenched tight. The arrogant smirk was entirely gone, replaced by the panicked realization that his brilliant financial shell game had just ruined his own in-laws on top of failing to steal my wealth. Jada rushed forward, grabbing Connor's arm. Her diamond bracelets clinked together loudly in the quiet room. Connor. What is she talking about? Jada shrieked, her perfect hostess facade cracking into 1,000 jagged pieces. Tell them you did not use their money. Tell them we have the funding for the condos. I does not have a dime, Jada, I said, stepping closer to my sister so she could not look away from me. He married you because he thought Mom and Dad were loaded. When he realized they were faking their wealth and drowning in debt, he panicked. He has been drowning in his own bad debt for years, and you were too busy taking selfies at country club brunches to notice the collection notices arriving in the mail. He used the forged medical documents to try and steal my bank accounts yesterday morning. When my lockdown stopped him, he threw mom and dad under the bus to get his hands on this brownstone. The reality of their absolute financial ruin crashed down on my parents. Vivica let out a guttural wailing sound. She grabbed the edge of the dining table, her knees buckling beneath her. She had spent her entire adult life curating an image of flawless upper-class perfection. She had sacrificed her own dignity and actively participated in identity theft just to maintain her social status. Now she was standing in front of her elite church friends and wealthy neighbors, completely exposed as a penniless fraud who had been scammed by her own son-in-law. "You stole from us!" Desmond roared, lunging toward Connor. My father grabbed Connor by the lapels of his custom suit, slamming him backward into the presentation easel. The architectural blueprints for the luxury condos crashed to the floor, tearing down the middle. "You took everything I worked for. I will ruin you." Several deacons from the church rushed forward, pulling my father off the terrified real estate developer. Connor stumbled, straightening his jacket, his chest heaving as he tried to regain some semblance of dignity. He looked at the angry crowd of investors who were now aggressively murmuring to each other, pulling out their phones to cancel any pending deals with his firm. "This is all a misunderstanding," Connor stammered, holding his hands up defensively, attempting to placate the wealthy crowd. The market shifted unexpectedly. "I just needed a bridge loan to secure the property. Once the condos sell, everyone will get their money back with interest. I am a visionary developer. You have to look at the big picture." "You are a common thief," I corrected him sharply, shutting down his sales pitch immediately. "And you are not developing anything. As the new owner of Apex Capital, I am calling in every single loan you have outstanding. I am seizing your business assets, your personal accounts, and those leased luxury cars parked outside. By tomorrow morning, you will be completely bankrupt." Jada let out a piercing scream. She turned on me, her face twisted with a level of hatred that was almost demonic. She lunged across the dining table, her hands curled into claws aiming right for my face. "You planned this," Jada screamed, kicking a chair out of her way. "You set us up. You always hated me because I was beautiful and popular. You are just a bitter, ugly nerd trying to ruin my perfect life." Keisha stepped neatly into Jada's path, blocking her before she could even reach me. Keisha did not raise a hand, but her presence was a solid, immovable wall. "Do not take another step toward her," Keisha warned, her voice low and lethal. "Your perfect life was funded by her bank account. You should be thanking her for letting you play dress-up for this long." I looked at my sister, watching her sob hysterically as her entire world burned to the ground. She was wearing a designer gown I paid for, standing in a house she tried to steal, crying over a man who had financially ruined our parents. It was a masterpiece of karmic justice, but I was not quite finished yet. The financial ruin was only the first part of my eviction process. Connor had tried to destroy my sanity and steal my freedom using forged medical documents. Simply taking his money was not enough. I needed to destroy his marriage right in front of the very people Jada cared about the most. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. The brownstone was equipped with a massive 85-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. Jada and Connor had planned to use it to show glossy promotional videos for their fake condo development. I had a very different presentation in mind. "You think your husband is just a financial fraud?" "Jada," I asked, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the room. "You think he was just working late all those nights trying to save his business? Let me show you what Connor considers a solid investment strategy." I swiped my thumb across my screen, locking my device onto the local wireless network. The television above the fireplace blinked to life. I was about to show the golden child exactly who she had married. I held my smartphone up my thumb, resting perfectly over the execution command on my custom-built application. The massive 85-inch flat-screen television mounted directly above my grandmother's antique fireplace blinked to life. A bright blue casting icon flashed in the center of the screen, replacing the static logo of Horizon Urban Ventures. Connor whipped his head around, his panicked eyes darting from my phone to the television. He reached frantically into his tailored pockets, searching for the remote control he thought governed the system. "You cannot turn it off, Connor," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence of the dining room. I hardwired that television into the internal network when I installed the security system for my grandmother 3 years ago. I have master administrative access to every piece of technology inside these brick walls. You are about to be the star of your very own premiere. I turned my attention to Jada, who was currently wiping away her mascara-stained tears with the back of her trembling hand. She had just learned she was financially destitute, but she still believed her marriage was a fortress. She still believed Connor was a wealthy victim of a bad market. You told everyone in your social circle that Connor was working 80-hour weeks to save his real estate developments, Jada, I said, stepping closer to the massive screen. You bragged at Sunday service about how dedicated your husband was. You posted pictures of him exhausted on the couch, claiming he was building a legacy for your future children. Let us take a look at exactly what kind of legacy Connor has been building. I tapped my screen one final time. The television burst into high-definition color. The crisp security footage filled the room, illuminating the shocked faces of the church deacons, the wealthy investors, and my extended family. The timestamp in the bottom right corner of the video indicated the footage was captured exactly 3 days ago at 11 o'clock at night. The video showed the opulent marble lobby of a five-star hotel in downtown Atlanta. The camera angle provided a perfect, unobstructed view of the front reception desk. Into the frame walked Connor, wearing the exact same gray custom suit he had worn to my office building earlier that week. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of guests as the woman in the video walked into the frame and wrapped her arms intimately around Connor's waist. She was wearing a stunning red cocktail dress, leaning her head against his shoulder, while he handed his credit card to the hotel concierge. Jada let out a strangled, horrific sound. The woman on the screen, kissing Connor's neck with absolute familiarity, was not a stranger. It was Chloe, Jada's best friend, her former college roommate, and the maid of honor at the very wedding I had paid for. Connor lunged toward the fireplace, his white privilege completely short-circuiting as he desperately clawed at the edges of the television, attempting to rip the power cord from the wall. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking with sheer terror. "That is doctored footage. She is a computer hacker. She faked the video." "You know nothing about digital forensics, Connor," I replied, projecting my voice so every single person in the room could hear the absolute truth. "That is raw, unedited security footage subpoenaed directly from the hotel management. I ran a cross-reference on the credit card you handed the concierge. You used the corporate account you funded by draining my parents' retirement portfolio to book the penthouse suite for you and my sister's maid of honor. You used my parents' life savings to fund your infidelity." The video continued to play mercilessly. Connor and Chloe stepped into the hotel elevator. The interior elevator camera captured them engaging in a passionate, aggressive kiss the moment the doors slid shut. The betrayal was so visceral, so undeniably clear, that it sucked all the remaining oxygen out of my grandmother's house. Jada stood frozen, her eyes wide and unblinking, as she stared at the 85-inch screen. Her entire world, her wealth, her status, her perfect marriage had just been methodically dismantled in less than 5 minutes. She looked down at her hands, at the massive diamond engagement ring Connor had proposed to her with. A ring she now knew was likely bought with stolen money or massive debt. She picked up her crystal wine glass from the edge of the dining table. The glass was full of expensive imported red wine. She did not say a word. She did not cry. She turned toward Connor, who was still frantically trying to pry the television from the brick wall. Jada let out a raw, feral scream that tore from the very bottom of her lungs and hurled the wineglass directly at his head. The heavy crystal shattered violently against the brick fireplace right next to Connor's temple. Dark red wine exploded across his crisp white shirt and splashed across the pristine blueprints of his fake condo development. Shards of glass rained down onto the original hardwood floors. Connor threw his arms up to shield his face, cowering against the wall like a frightened child. "You filthy, disgusting liar!" Jada shrieked, lunging toward him. She began beating her fists against his chest, tearing at his expensive suit, her manicured nails scratching at his neck. "You slept with Chloe. You stole my parents' money. You made me a fool in front of everyone." Connor grabbed her wrist, struggling to hold her back. "Jada, stop," he begged, trying to physically overpower her while maintaining his innocent victim routine. "It meant nothing. She meant nothing. We can fix this. We can still get the money from your sister." The absolute audacity of him mentioning my money while his wife was attacking him for his infidelity pushed the crowd over the edge. Two church deacons and a wealthy investor stepped forward, grabbing Connor by his shoulders and physically dragging him away from my sister. They slammed him back against the dining table, restraining him completely. Vivica stood perfectly still, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with total devastation. The flawless upper-class image she had sacrificed her entire soul to protect was entirely gone. She was standing in a room full of her most elite friends, watching her golden child completely lose her mind, while her white savior son-in-law was exposed as a bankrupt cheating thief. Aunt Shirley, who had approached me with such condescending pity just 10 minutes earlier, was now staring at Vivica with open disgust. The whispered judgments began instantly. The elite social circle that Vivica had worshipped her entire life was already turning their backs on her, actively distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout of our family. Desmond looked like a man who had just been handed a death sentence. He looked at the television screen where the video of Connor and Chloe was still playing on a loop. He looked at his empty-handed wife and his hysterical daughter. He had traded his integrity, his financial security, and his relationship with his actual successful daughter for a man who had robbed him blind and humiliated his family. I walked over to the dining table, stepping carefully over the shattered crystal and spilled wine. I looked down at Connor, who was still being restrained by the older men. His tailored suit was ruined, his face was scratched, and his arrogance was entirely gone. "You thought you could walk into my bank and declare me insane, Connor?" I asked, my tone conversational but deadly. "You thought you could use a corrupt judge to lock me in a psychiatric ward so you could steal my wealth and continue playing real estate tycoon with your mistress. You picked the wrong black woman to target. I build systems that catch international cyber terrorists before breakfast. You are just a mediocre man with a good suit and a bad credit score." I turned my attention to my sister. Jada had collapsed onto a dining chair, weeping uncontrollably into her hands. The Cartier diamonds on her wrists sparkled mockingly in the chandelier light. "I told you to leave this house, Jada," I said, showing her absolutely no mercy. "You stood in my kitchen and told me to go eat with the help because I was not legally sound. You mocked my business while I was paying off your criminal charges. You actively participated in a plan to have me locked away in a mental institution just so you could keep funding your fake life. I do not feel a single ounce of pity for you." Vivica finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. "Zora, please," she begged, taking a tentative step toward me. She reached her hand out, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "We did not know. We did not know he was cheating. We did not know he was broke. You have to help us fix this. We are your family." I looked at my mother, feeling nothing but absolute chilling detachment. "You knew exactly who you were dealing with, Mom," I replied. "You just did not care, as long as he maintained the country club aesthetic. You chose the illusion of wealth over your own flesh and blood. You hired an illegitimate daughter to steal my grandmother's legacy. Do not ever use the word family with me again." I picked up my leather briefcase from the edge of the table. I looked around the room, making eye contact with the shocked guests, the disgusted investors, and my utterly ruined relatives. "You have 24 hours to vacate my property," I announced to the room at large. "Take your bankrupt son-in-law, your ruined blueprints, and your shattered egos, and get out of my grandmother's house. When I return tomorrow morning with my security team and the federal marshals, this building better be completely empty." I turned on my heel and walked toward the grand mahogany front doors with Keisha right beside me. We did not look back. We did not need to. The sound of Jada's hysterical sobbing and the loud, angry demands of the defrauded investors echoing through the hallway was the only confirmation I needed. The Golden family was officially dead, and I was the one who had finally pulled the plug. Monday morning arrives with the precision of a ticking time bomb. I am sitting in my Buckhead office sipping black coffee and watching my dual monitors. On the left screen, I am monitoring the financial freeze protocol my team initiated at midnight. On the right screen, I have a live feed from a local news helicopter hovering over Midtown Atlanta. I did not sleep. I spent the entire night ensuring that every single trap I set the day before snapped shut with absolute perfection. Desmond and Vivica wake up to a reality they have never experienced in their adult lives. Total devastating poverty. I have a contact at the luxury boutique in Phipps Plaza who texts me a play-by-play of my mother's morning. Vivica walks into the high-end store expecting to drop $10,000 on a new seasonal wardrobe to heal her wounded pride. She gathers armfuls of designer silk and leather, treating the retail staff like common servants. She slides her sleek metal credit card across the glass counter, waiting for the satisfying beep of approval. Instead, the machine blares a harsh red denial. She snatches the card back, blaming the machine. She pulls out another card. Denied. She pulls out a third card. Account frozen. My contact tells me Vivica starts screaming at the store manager, demanding they run the numbers again, claiming there is a glitch in the banking system. I know exactly when reality sets in, because my phone buzzes with a frantic alert from the very banking institution she is trying to withdraw from. She is completely locked out. Desmond is having his own catastrophic crisis at his exclusive country club. His morning golf game with his fellow church deacons is interrupted when the club manager politely but firmly asks him to step off the putting green. The manager informs my father in front of his elite social circle that his membership dues have bounced and his accounts are locked pending a federal investigation. Desmond tries to laugh it off, trying to maintain his pristine patriarchal image, but the manager hands him his golf clubs and escorts him to the parking lot. While my parents are discovering the bottom of their empty wallets, Connor is experiencing a much higher level of destruction. I turn my attention to the news broadcast playing on my right monitor. Federal agents wearing dark windbreakers with Internal Revenue Service printed in bold yellow letters are storming the glass doors of Connor's real estate firm. They are carrying empty cardboard boxes and hauling out servers, computers, and filing cabinets. Connor thought he was an untouchable financial genius. He thought hiding his shadow loans, his fraudulent medical documents, and his wash trading schemes behind a labyrinth of shell companies made him invisible. But he forgot that I track digital footprints for a living. Late last night, I compiled every single fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, and every illegal offshore transfer into an airtight forensic packet. I encrypted the data and sent it directly to the regional director of the Federal Prosecutor Office. I handed them a slam dunk indictment on a silver platter. I watched the live camera feed as two federal agents walk Connor out of the building in heavy steel handcuffs. His custom Italian suit is wrinkled and stained with sweat. His face is pale. The local media cameras flash blindingly in his eyes as he is shoved into the back of a black government vehicle. His mistress is not there to comfort him. Jada is nowhere in sight. The arrogant developer who tried to lock me in a psychiatric ward is now entirely alone, facing decades in federal prison. At the exact moment Connor is being booked into federal custody, a bonded courier arrives at my parents' sprawling estate in Alpharetta. I arranged for the delivery to be highly visible, ensuring the nosy neighbors could watch the entire exchange. The courier walks up the long manicured driveway and hands a thick certified envelope to my father, who is standing on the porch still wearing his golf attire, looking utterly defeated. I know exactly what that envelope contains, because I drafted the letter myself alongside my corporate attorneys. It is a formal notice of debt transfer and immediate foreclosure. The letter explains in excruciatingly clear legal terms that my corporate holding company successfully finalized the buyout of Apex Capital Solutions. It details how Connor illegally leveraged their entire retirement portfolio, their life insurance policies, and the deed to their home to secure his shadow loan. The letter explains that because the loan was intentionally defaulted by Connor, I am now the master lien holder of every single asset they possess. I own the house they are standing in. I own the luxury vehicles parked in their driveway. I own the very ground beneath their feet. The letter gives them 24 hours to vacate the premises before I send the county sheriff to physically remove them and their belongings. They are stripped of their wealth, their social standing, and their fake respectability in a single morning. I can only imagine the sheer panic echoing through the halls of their massive house. The realization that they traded their actual successful daughter for a cheating bankrupt son-in-law must be suffocating. For 30 years, Vivica and curated a flawless image of Black excellence. They served on charity boards. They judged other families for their shortcomings. They demanded absolute perfection from me while hiding their own financial rot. Now the rot is entirely exposed. Their country club friends will stop taking their calls. The church congregation they ruled over will whisper about them in the pews. They will be social pariahs. And the most beautiful part of this entire takedown is that I did not have to invent a single lie to destroy them. I simply handed the absolute truth over to the authorities and let gravity do the rest. My phone remains completely silent. They are too humiliated to call me directly, and their service providers are likely suspending their accounts due to non-payment. The silence is the most peaceful sound I have heard in years. 3 hours later, the security intercom on my desk buzzes loudly, breaking the quiet focus of my office. My head of security informs me that my parents and my sister have bypassed the lobby check-in and are currently causing a massive scene as the elevator bank. They slipped in behind a corporate catering delivery and are screaming at the front desk attendants, demanding they need to see the CEO immediately. Send them up, I tell security, keeping my voice perfectly steady. Let them in. I stand up and adjust my blazer, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. I wait for the inevitable explosion. The heavy glass doors to my executive suite swing open with a violent crash, and the Golden family stumbles inside. They look absolutely unrecognizable, stripped of their arrogant armor. Vivica is missing her usual flawless makeup. Her face is blotchy and red from crying, her designer silk blouse wrinkled and stained with sweat. Desmond looks like he aged 20 years overnight, his broad shoulders slumped and his hands shaking uncontrollably. Jada is a total wreck. Her expensive hair extensions are messy, and she is clutching a crumpled tissue, weeping hysterically. Her husband is in federal custody. Her bank accounts are frozen, and the illusion of her perfect life has been shattered into a million unfixable pieces. They stop in the center of my office, staring at the sleek modern furniture, the panoramic views of the city, and the sheer undeniable power radiating from my workspace. I do not walk over to greet them. I walk slowly back to my massive mahogany desk and take my seat, letting the heavy silence stretch out and suffocate them. Zora, please, Vivica begs, her voice cracking as she steps forward, reaching her hands out toward me. You have to stop this. They took Connor away in handcuffs this morning. The bank is taking the house. My credit cards are declining at the grocery store. We have nothing left. You are ruining us. I lean back in my leather chair, crossing my arms over my chest. You have exactly what you earned, Mom, I reply coldly. You played a dangerous game of theft and deception, and you lost. Desmond falls heavily into one of the plush guest chairs, burying his face in his large hands. You cannot do this to your own flesh and blood, Zora. He groans, his voice thick with fake despair. We are your parents. Jada is your sister. You are destroying us over a misunderstanding. We only did what we did at the bank because we were desperate. You have so much money and you never share. You sit up here in your corporate tower while your family drowns in the streets. The sheer audacity of his gaslighting makes my blood boil. The nerve to stand in my office after trying to lock me in a psychiatric ward and claim that I never shared my resources. I sit forward, placing both hands flat on my desk, leaning toward them with lethal intensity. Never share. I repeat the words, slowly tasting the absolute poison of their lies. Let us talk about sharing, Dad. Let us talk about the $5,000 a month I quietly transferred into your checking account for 3 years to keep your church mortgage from defaulting so you could keep playing the wealthy deacon. Let us talk about the $50,000 tuition bill I paid so Jada could join her elite sorority and pretend she was old money. Let us talk about the 2 luxury cars parked in your driveway right now. I bought those cars. I paid the insurance premiums. I funded your entire fake lifestyle while you told your country club friends I was just a bitter antisocial nerd working a boring computer job. Jada sobs louder, falling to her knees right in the middle of my office. She looks up at me, her face streaked with black mascara and running foundation. Zora, please, she wails, grabbing the edge of my desk with trembling hands. Connor is going to prison. He lost everything. He cheated on me with my best friend. I have no money for a lawyer to divorce him. I have nowhere to go. You have to help me. I am your sister. I looked down at my sister, feeling absolutely zero pity for the woman who handed me a paper plate and told me to eat in the kitchen less than 24 hours ago. You stood in my grandmother's house and called me legally incapacitated, Jada. I remind her softly, making sure she hears every syllable. You watched your husband try to lock me in a psychiatric ward so you could steal my money to buy new diamonds. You laughed when he served me with forged medical documents. Do not come into my office crying about family loyalty now. Vivica slams her hand on the desk, leaning over to glare at me, dropping the weeping victim act and showing her true malicious face. We had to take the money, Zora, she shouts, her voice echoing off the glass walls. Your grandmother was a bitter old woman. She hated me because I came from a working-class neighborhood. She left that $4.5 million trust to you, just to punish us. We deserved a piece of that legacy. You did not even need it. You are just a selfish, cruel girl holding on to a grudge. I smile, a sharp, chilling smile that makes my mother back away slowly. You are right about one thing, Mom, I say, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Grandmother did know exactly where you came from, but she did not hate you because you were poor. She hated you because you were greedy, manipulative, and cruel. She watched you treat me like a scapegoat my entire life, while you worshipped a golden child who never lifted a finger to work. I open the top drawer of my desk and pull out a thick legal file bound in heavy red ribbon. I toss it onto the table right in front of them, letting the heavy thud punctuate my next sentence. That $4.5 million at the bank was just a decoy, I reveal, dropping the ultimate truth bomb into the room. It was a highly visible liquid account she set up specifically to see if you would ever be desperate enough to try and steal it. Grandmother knew your financial house of cards would eventually collapse. She knew you and Connor would get greedy enough to commit fraud. Desmond's eyes widen in absolute horror as he stares at the red ribbon. What are you saying? He whispers, his voice barely audible. I am saying the real legacy was hidden, I reply, leaning back in my chair and folding my hands. Grandmother placed her actual $20 million fortune into an airtight blind trust offshore. A trust that bypassed probate completely and named me as the sole exclusive beneficiary the moment she passed away. You risked federal prison, you hired an illegitimate daughter, and you ruined your entire social standing to steal $4.5 million, while $20 million was sitting right under your nose, entirely out of your reach. You played yourselves. Jada remains on the floor. The plush carpet of my executive office absorbs the sound of her frantic breathing. She grabs the edge of my mahogany desk, her perfectly manicured fingernails digging into the polished wood. Zora. Please, you have to help me. Jada begs, her voice entirely stripped of the arrogant entitlement she wore just yesterday. Connor is going to federal prison. The agent seized all his accounts this morning. I took my name and put it on a dozen fraudulent shell companies without my knowledge. If I do not hire a ruthless divorce attorney right now, the feds are going to seize my personal accounts and charge me as an accessory to his massive real estate fraud. I have absolutely nothing left. I look down at my sister. The woman who handed me a plastic plate and told me to eat in the kitchen is now kneeling at my feet, begging for a financial lifeline. She expects me to cave. She expects the ingrained societal pressure of protecting Black family secrets to override my own self-preservation. But my grandmother did not leave me $20 million to be a human shield for greedy people. I open the heavy bottom drawer of my desk. I do not reach for my checkbook. Instead, I pull out a thick stack of legal documents prepared by my elite corporate legal team earlier this morning. I drop the stack directly in front of Jada's trembling hands. The crisp white paper hits the desk with a heavy, authoritative thud. I place a sleek silver fountain pen right on top of the stack. I will fund your divorce, Jada, I say, keeping my voice completely devoid of emotion. I will wire a $500,000 retainer to the most aggressive defense and divorce attorney in Atlanta before you leave this building. You will not spend a single day in federal prison for Connor's pathetic financial crimes. Jada lets out a loud gasp of relief. She reaches for the silver pen, a grateful sob escaping her throat. Thank you, Zora. She cries, her tears spilling onto the mahogany wood. Thank you so much. I promise I will pay you back. I promise I will change. But my hand snaps out and I press my palm firmly down on top of the legal document, stopping her from taking the pen. I did not say there were no conditions, Jada. I warn her, my tone turning sharp and lethal. I do not want your fake apologies. I do not want your empty promises. I want absolute, undeniable accountability. I slide the first document toward her, tapping the bold black text at the top of the page. This is a sworn legal affidavit, I explain, looking directly into her panicked eyes. It is a full, comprehensive confession. It details exactly how Connor and Maya orchestrated the bank heist. It details how Connor paid off a corrupt judge to forge my medical guardianship papers. And it details how you actively participated in attempting to steal my grandmother's brownstone using stolen funds. I look up from Jada and lock eyes with Vivica and Desmond, who are standing frozen near the door. The color completely drains from my father's face. There are affidavits for you two as well, I announce, my voice ringing with total authority. Your confessions detail your exact involvement in the identity theft at the bank. You will admit to hiring Desmond's secret daughter to impersonate me. You will admit to conspiring to commit federal wire fraud. You are going to sign these papers right here, right now, under penalty of perjury. Vivica steps forward, her hands shaking violently. You are insane. Zora, my mother screams, her voice shrill with terror. If we sign those papers, we are handing the district attorney a loaded gun. You are sending your own parents to prison. You are trying to destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, Mom. I fire back, refusing to give her an inch of ground. You walked into my bank and tried to lock me in a psychiatric facility. You tried to erase my entire existence to fund your country club lifestyle. I am simply giving the authorities the exact truth. Desmond shakes his head, backing away toward the heavy glass doors of my office. We will not do it, Desmond declares, trying to summon his old patriarchal authority. We will take our chances in court. No jury will convict a respected church deacon and his wife. We will say Connor manipulated us. We will say we were just trying to help our sick daughter. I lean back in my chair, crossing my arms. Go ahead, Dad, I say with a cold, empty smile. Take your chances in federal court. See how well your church deacon routine plays out when the prosecutors subpoena the bank security footage of you sliding a fake passport across the desk. See what happens when the IRS audits your empty retirement accounts and discovers you willfully participated in a wash trading scheme. If you fight this, you will go down as the masterminds and you will serve maximum sentences. I point a firm finger at the stack of confessions on my desk. But if you sign these papers today, you walk into the district attorney's office as cooperating witnesses. You hand them Connor and Maya on a silver platter. You give the feds the corrupt judge and the shadow lender. You will still face the consequences, but a judge will offer you a plea deal for blowing the entire conspiracy wide open. The reality of their bleak, hopeless situation settles over the room like a heavy, suffocating blanket. They have no money. They have no lawyers. Their social standing is completely decimated. The only thing standing between them and decades in a federal penitentiary is the silver pen resting on my desk. Jada does not even hesitate. The instinct for self-preservation kicks in, overriding whatever lingering loyalty she has to her husband or our parents. She grabs the silver pen, her hands shaking so badly she can barely grip it. She flips to the last page of her affidavit and signs her name with a frantic, messy scrawl. Jada pushes the signed document toward me, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. I signed it. Jada sobs, her chest heaving. I told the truth. Just please give me the money for the lawyer. Please do not let Connor drag me down with him. I pull her confession across the desk, inspecting the signature carefully. I nod once and open my laptop. Within 30 seconds, I initiate the wire transfer to the defense attorney I selected for her. The funds clear immediately. I slide the remaining 2 affidavits toward the edge of the desk facing my parents. Your turn, I command. Desmond looks at the papers and then looks at my mother. The illusion of their powerful, unified marriage is completely shattered. They are just 2 greedy, desperate people backed into a corner of their own making. My father slowly walks toward the desk. He looks defeated, his broad shoulders slumped, his arrogant posture totally erased. He picks up the silver pen and signs his name on the dotted line. He does not say a single word. He just signs his own guilt into the permanent legal record. Vivica is the last one left. She stares at the affidavit as if it is a venomous snake. She glares at me with a level of hatred that could burn down a building. You will rot for this, Zora. My mother hisses, her voice shaking with absolute malice. You are a cold, heartless girl. You never belonged in this family. I belong to my grandmother, I correct her sharply. And she made sure I was protected from parasites like you. Sign the paper, Mom, or I will call security to escort you out, and you can wait for the federal marshals to kick your front door down tomorrow morning. Vivica snatches the pen from Desmond's hand. She signs her confession with angry, violent strokes, tearing the thick paper slightly with the tip of the pen. She throws the pen back onto my desk and turns around, marching toward the glass doors of my executive suite without looking back. Desmond follows her, his head hung low in ultimate disgrace. Jada scrambles up from the floor, wiping her face, and runs out after them, leaving the heavy glass doors to swing shut behind their ruined legacy. I gather the 3 signed sworn confessions and place them neatly into a secure folder. I pick up my desk phone and press the direct line to my lead corporate attorney. The papers are signed. I instruct my lawyer, my voice steady and resolute. Drive them straight to the district attorney's office. File them immediately. Make sure Connor and Maya take the full brunt of the indictment. The legal reckoning strikes Atlanta with the force of a Category 5 hurricane. By Tuesday morning, the local news networks are running wall-to-wall coverage of the massive real estate fraud and identity theft scandal. The signed confessions provide the district attorney with an airtight, impenetrable case. Connor is indicted on 17 counts of federal wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His arrogant smirk completely vanishes when a federal judge denies his bail, deeming him a severe flight risk. He is remanded to a federal holding facility, forced to trade his bespoke Italian suits for a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. Maya, the illegitimate sister who thought she could steal my life for a quick payout, is arrested and charged with severe identity theft. She tries to plead ignorance, claiming Desmond manipulated her, but her signature on the fake passport application and her physical presence in the bank vault sink her defense entirely. She is facing years behind bars, her student loan debt, now the least of her problems. The social exile of Vivica and Desmond is absolute and merciless. The elite circles they sacrifice their morality to impress drop them instantly. Their country club memberships are permanently revoked. The church deacons politely but firmly ask my father to step down from all leadership boards to avoid bringing shame to the congregation. With their retirement accounts completely drained by Connor's schemes and their house seized by my corporate entity, they have absolutely nowhere to hide. My parents are forced to pack whatever belongings fit into their vehicles and move into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment near the busy, noisy airport. It is a harsh, loud environment miles away from the quiet, manicured lawns of Alpharetta. They have no domestic staff, no luxury dinners, and no golden child to parade around. They are left with nothing but the crushing daily reminder of their own phenomenal greed. With the toxic noise of my family permanently silenced, I turn my full attention to reclaiming the only thing that truly matters. I hire the best historic restoration contractors in the state of New York. We rip out the cheap, sterile modern renovations Connor and Jada attempted to install in the Harlem brownstone. We restore the original mahogany crown molding, we polish the antique hardwood floors, and we bring the historic brick facade back to its original breathtaking glory. But I do not stop at a simple restoration. I transform the entire building into exactly what my grandmother would have wanted. 6 months later, I stand on the front steps of the newly renovated property. A beautiful, polished bronze plaque is mounted next to the heavy front doors reading, "The Legacy Center for Excellence in Technology." I transform the entire first and second floors into a state-of-the-art community, STEM and cybersecurity training center dedicated exclusively to young, brilliant Black women. The rooms where my parents tried to host their fake luxury dinner are now filled with high-end computer servers, coding stations, and mentorship lounges. The grand opening event is vibrant and full of genuine love. There are no fake country club investors or gossiping church deacons. The brownstone is filled with ambitious young women learning how to write code, build firewalls, and secure their own digital futures. They are learning how to be independent, untouchable, and brilliant. Keisha walks out onto the front porch, holding 2 crystal glasses filled with sparkling apple cider. She hands me a glass and smiles, looking incredibly proud. "You did it, Zora," Keisha says, tapping her glass against mine. "You saved the house. You saved the legacy." And you are going to change the lives of every single girl who walks through those doors. I take a sip of the sweet cider, feeling the warm Harlem breeze against my face. I really did. I reply, a deep, profound peace settling comfortably into my bones. My phone buzzes in the pocket of my blazer. I pull it out and look at the illuminated screen. It is a text message from an unsaved number, but I recognize the area code instantly. The message is short, desperate, and pathetic. We have nothing left. We are struggling to pay rent. Please, Zora, you have to help us. You are our daughter. I stare at the words sent by Vivica from whatever cheap prepaid phone she is currently using. I do not feel a single ounce of guilt. I do not feel anger or sadness or obligation. I feel absolutely nothing. I press my thumb against the screen. I delete the message. I permanently block the number. I slide the phone back into my pocket, disconnecting myself from their toxicity forever. I turn around and walk back inside the brownstone, surrounded by the sound of brilliant young women laughing and learning, celebrating my completely unbothered, authentic life. True family is defined by respect, not blood. Zora's journey proves that you cannot heal in the toxic environment that broke you. When relatives weaponize your success and manipulate your loyalty, the most powerful response is absolute financial and emotional independence. Never shrink yourself to make insecure people comfortable. Never hesitate to build an impenetrable fortress around your peace. Your ultimate revenge is walking away to build a brilliant, unbothered life on your own terms. Have you ever drawn a hard line with toxic relatives to protect your peace? Share your story below and subscribe for more empowering content.